Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Rise Urban Nation. I'm your host, Terrell Simmons, and I got an amazing guest in the building, Dr. Herbert Harris. How are you this great evening, fine sir?
Incredibly great, Terrell. And I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. So I'm gonna give the people a little. We just had a great conversation. I want to tune you into the conversation that we had before we hit record. So Dr. Harris reached out to me on Instagram. One, I'm in awe that the OGs are on Instagram spreading knowledge and giving me some love. And I'm honored to be in this platform with you. And we had a great conversation earlier because I told you how I used to go speak out to schools, and I still do from time to time. And there's a lot of limiting beliefs. A lot of our young people have limiting beliefs on what they can do, what they can be. And we were having a great conversation about a paradigm shift. And I want you to repeat some of the things you had said and talk about that. What we kind of started our conversation with, because I think that was a good way just to kind of leap into today's podcast.
Well, Terrell, we were talking about the fact that our school system has programmed our young people with really low expectations. You remember in the story of Malcolm X, when you read the autobiography of Malcolm X, he was saying he wanted to be a lawyer. And his teacher said, well, your kind can't be lawyers. You need to learn to do something with your hands. And so what happens now, especially in the public school system and in some of the other school systems, the paradigm that our children are given is a limited paradigm that if you don't shoot something, hit something, run real fast, that there's no place for you in this country. And when you buy into it, I think Oprah said, when you know better, you do better. But if that's all you see, then you think that's all there is.
Yeah. Man, that's a big reason why we exist, because as I was telling you, you can't be what you can't see. And let me not put that all in the youth, because sometimes adults have limiting beliefs too, because they were brought up in that same paradigm, and then they push that onto the kids as well. Now, you've managed to do exceptionally well for yourself, and you got the doctor in front of it. Tell me how you built this amazing career for yourself, was able to escape that paradigm shift and get to where you are today in your career.
Well, Terrell, it's a long story because I come from the real old school. In other words, God has blessed me to come through segregated schools, be discovered in the South in a segregated school. When I was a kid, black kids didn't even take the college boards.
Really?
They had a separate exam called the Merit Scholarship Exam. And I was the first kid from my school to go to an Ivy League school from high school.
Wow.
So we came up completely educated in black schools with black teachers, with black principals. Never had a meaningful conversation with a white person until I was 16 years old.
Wow.
But it was an environment of love, where the teachers had high expectations for you, where they didn't tell you, they told you were going to do something, you were going to be somebody. And with that, I moved into college and did Columbia University, an Ivy League school. And eventually I became an attorney.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting experience because I came up through my family business. My uncle was a lawyer, and that's something that we as people of color need to really look at. We have so many one-generational businesses. So came under his leadership, and having a man who knew what he was doing to talk to and guide me was profound. Nice. I also got into the music industry, and my first book was a book called How to Make Money in Music.
Okay. Woo. That should be a bestseller right there, because we often are in the music industry making money, but we are not at the top of the food chain in the music industry.
Well, I'll tell you this, though, I have to take my hats off to the rappers, because when I came in the era of disco, I played the Apollo Theater. And we had with Gamble and Huff and the Sound of Philadelphia, that whole era, which was like booming for music and black people and learning and doing, but we weren't making that big money. Somebody else was making the big money.
Right.
And the rappers came along, and that's why I love the rappers, man. I worked with a few groups in the early days that when the rappers came along and when they were not accepted by the music industry. I remember when they wouldn't play the records until Sugar Hill came along, you didn't hear any rap records on the radio. And so they had to create a whole underground.
Yeah.
But once they did that, they saw where the money was.
What?
And so think about this. Guys like Jackie Wilson, you know, now, way before your time, but was one of the biggest stars in the black community. And he crossed over. He was one of the first crossover artists. Died broke. Okay. And so most of the entertainers in that era never understood and never got the money they would do. But when the rappers came along and they saw where the money really was, you know, so that's when they were getting $1 million deals and making all this money. And so if you think about it, Terrell, records don't sell for 100 times what they sold for 50 years ago. They don't even sell for 10 times. They're still about the same price. You know, not that different. Yeah. But so the money was always there, but the rappers showed how to get that money. And I evolved through that. You know, that first book, How to Make Money in Music, is still on. You can buy it on the internet. It's been selling. You know, they're reselling it now. We don't get, but for 10 years, we, you know, I buy it every now and then just to make sure nobody's printing it, you know. You know. But I moved on through there and I started working in the, at one point after I started teaching at Malcolm King College.
Okay.
And to show you how, when you have an idea, one morning I was in my meditation. And in my meditation, the thought came to me, why don't you teach college? Like, yeah. I go out jogging. First person I run into that morning is Dr. Mattie Cook, who was the president of Malcolm King College in New York. I said, Dr. Cook, I want to teach a course. She said, what's the name of the course? And out of the blue came the title, Achievement Motivation. She said, I love it. When can you start? I'm like, you know, sometimes you ask for stuff and it comes so fast, you're not prepared.
Yeah. The universe, if you ask, will provide sometimes. So
it will provide, you know.
You know, I don't think a lot of people really understand how that law of attraction works when you put a thought out there and you act on the thought and then you start to attract the things that you're seeking.
Absolutely. And see, because a thought is energy. And when you look at the theory of relativity, E, energy, equals MC squared, Einstein. Right? M is mass or manifestation. So any vibration you have, whatever you recognize in your mind, you energize in your heart.
Yeah.
Whatever you energize in your heart, you realize in your life.
Well, that is true. That is true.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious to know, because you know, let me run back because I there's something that I always ask my guests, because I love to see how, you know, if they had to describe themselves to the world, you know, you're a man of many things, and I feel like you're a Renaissance man of your time. But for the people who don't know who you are, how would you introduce the world to Dr. Herbert Harris? Who is Dr. Herbert Harris? And I know that's a deep question, and I want you to go as far as wide as you want to go with this.
Well, I think most of the world knows me from the book, The 12 Universal Laws of Success. And so that book has been translated into at least 9 languages. That's Chinese, Italian, Romanian. And that book has, over the years, done hundreds of thousands of sales. Yeah, I know it's been duplicated and stolen and all that, but I know that hundreds of thousands of people have been transformed by that book.
Yeah.
And so
Often
most people,
duplicated, but never imitated. Let me say that.
absolutely. But the interesting thing is, I never put my pictures in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I do that is because, and I still think it's true today,
Mm-hmm.
when a black man or woman puts her picture in the book goes in the African American section of the bookstore.
Mm.
And if you look in any bookstore, the self help section is much bigger. The business section is much bigger.
Yeah.
And so I never put my pictures in the book. Only one edition. At one point, I sold the rights. And to your listeners, when you write a book, an intellectual property is like a diamond.
Uh-huh.
I sold the rights to a publisher in New York, and they republished it under a different title, The Golden 12 Universal Rules for Achieving Success.
Ooh. Okay.
Okay. That book was red and black, and it had my picture on it. It had a cover blurb by George Frazier. Dr. George, he
I
wrote
remember George Frazier, yeah.
Yeah. And that book sold nowhere near what the 12 Universal Laws of Success. Same book.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But
Yeah.
so if you say, who is Dr. Herbert Harris, that book has really defined me over the years. And because we've taken the book and transformed it into seminars, I've been doing seminars, syndicated newspaper column, because my goal was not to be a motivational speaker, but to be a transformational teacher.
Ooh, I like that. And something that you're definitely doing with this book. Now, I want to know, how did you come up with the title of the book, and then I want to jump into these 12 universal laws, because I feel like we need to unpack that in our time together. So how did you come up with the idea and the concept of this book?
Well, 12 is a spiritual number. Okay. A number of completion, a holy number. Originally, it was the 10 universal laws of success, because I was modeling after the 10 commandments.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
But as a writer, you have to be guided by the writing. So once you decide to become a writer, you commit to the time to sit there and have the discipline to write. But then the ideas that come to you are coming from another space. They're coming from that higher consciousness that you can plug into.
Yeah.
And so the initial 10 universal laws of success, once I got down into it, I realized that there was more, and it evolved to the 12 universal laws of success, because 12 is that number of completion, a spiritual number, etc. So that's how it came about. The topics grew out of those classes when Dr. Cook had me teach achievement motivation.
Yeah.
I went to, many of the students were people who had been out in the world. It was kind of a junior college, but, who were coming back to start getting back into the education arena. And so they weren't your traditional students.
Yeah.
And so when I got the Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich, or some of the other, personal development books, it didn't quite fit them. It was too much stuff. And so the initial evolution of the book began from the notes I put together for the class. And so the idea of the class was to give people something practical. It wasn't just enough to say, we can talk about the law of thought, and, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Yeah. But how does that translate into your life? How does your thoughts impact your life?
Yeah.
And so that was the goal then, to take the ideas, each law, the law of thought. A man thinketh, so is he. Well, what are some of the thoughts? So the first thought you have is about yourself. Where do you come from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That right there, in essence, is a loaded thing, especially when you're Black in America, because, going back to what we were talking about, the school system education of a Black person in America usually starts at slavery, but we have lineage that goes beyond slavery that goes back to Africa. So how do we tap into where we're from when some of that has either been lost, stolen, or rewritten for us?
Well, let me throw another one of my books, and we got is solving the race issue in America.
Okay, bring it
Okay,
to me. Bring it to me.
okay. So when we go back, I had the opportunity to go to Egypt and study with Dr. Dr.
The,
Ben Yohanan, the black
mm-hmm,
Egyptologist. And when you go in Israel, when you go to Egypt and you go in the pyramids and you go to the temple at Abydos and these other places, you see black people up on the walls.
mm-hmm,
And you realize, to talk about how education is used to manipulate, many of our young people don't realize that Egypt was in Africa.
mm-hmm.
Egypt is in North Africa. Okay. And the Nile River that comes through Egypt starts at the mountain of the moon, Mount Kilimanjaro, down in the heart of Africa.
Mm.
And so that idea, then, once you go to Egypt and you see that, and once you study people like J.A. Rogers and Dr. Ben, and you realize that our people were ruling and running things 5,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
10,000 years ago, when you're in Egypt and you go to the Step Pyramid and you're looking at something that's between 5 and 10,000 years old. Or when you go to the temple at Abydos and you see the list of pharaohs covering 2,500 years. In other words, 2,500 years, black people were writing on walls and keeping records.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard something today that was so interesting. It was on television, and it was a question that they were teaching some students, and the question was, where was the first library created? And it said the first library was created in Samaria around 600 BC, completely negating the great library in Alexandria that the Greek scholars, Herodotus, went to study in 900 BC. So you see how the education can be manipulated to literally take a people who were, you might say, a people who have a rich heritage going back to things that in Egypt they built pyramids. And today I don't think we have the technology to actually build a pyramid.
Yeah, and that's why it's one of the greatest wonders of the world. Where they're still trying to figure out how did the people without the technology we have today build something so advanced. And going back to your point, the education, I even heard that, I haven't gotten a chance to dive deeper into this, that the first university was actually in Africa, and people used to travel to Africa to learn at this university that was open to everybody who was open to learn and share knowledge and educate. And that's where the ideal of university came from.
Yes. Well, the Greeks, we talk about Aristotle and Socrates, but Herodotus, who was the Greek historian in 900 BC, you're talking 1,000 years before the birth of Christ, was in Egypt studying with the Egyptians in Alexandria. It wasn't Alexandria then, because Alexandria was named after Alexander the Great, who came there 600 years later. Okay, but it was there before he got there. And so when you look at the learning center, when you look at the history of medicine, medicine came out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Okay. The Bible really came out of Egypt. When you look at the Ark and compare the cross, very similar. So Egypt was a cradle of civilization. But one of the interesting things, when I was in the museum, the old museum, they built a new one now, the old museum in Cairo, Dr. Ben pointed out a message. He said, now, there was a section of the museum that had no dates. Now, when you go in a museum that has no dates, and I'm like, that's interesting. What's that about? And this was a section of the museum that we had artifacts from the heart of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that they did not want to put the dates there because if they put dates there, it would have meant that in Africa, thousands of years ago, black men down in the heart of Africa were riding horses, were making jewelry, were writing, okay, were farming.
Right.
They had jewelry, rings that looked just like my ring.
Right.
They had crowns that looked just like the crown that the Pope was wearing.
Right.
They had writing. Nobody ever talked about the fact that they were writing back then. They had samples of the writing. And so Africa has been the heart of the world of knowledge for thousands of years. And I mean thousands and thousands of years. So
Right.
we have to, as black people, claim that heritage.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let somebody take it away from you. Learn about it and claim it. Not
Yeah.
to be superior, but just to be truthful.
Yeah. And as you said before, knowledge is power, and now knowledge is also enlightening because once you know where you're from and the rich history you have, it's hard to stay in the mindset that has been narrowed into this corner of what society is trying to mold you to or perceive what you perceive what they perceive you
Yeah.
to be, right?
Yes. There was a lady on, I just saw it on the news, and she was speaking to, I think, the Board of Education
Mm-hmm.
in a particular town, and she was saying that she objected to the fact that they were teaching the kids there that black people were people who of unknown origin who probably came into this country who probably were always slaves or servants.
Wow.
Yeah. And she was making a great point. As a matter of fact, I think George Frazier sent it to me.
Uh-huh.
And she was making a great point. It's like, wait a minute, we're teaching young black and white kids this untruth. And so now when they grow up, how are white kids going to relate to black kids? They're going to relate to them like your people were slaves and servants. My people were kings and queens,
Mm-hmm.
which changes their paradigm. So
Mm-hmm.
education is the key. Right education is more important. When people try to undermine who you really are and manipulate it for purposes of
Right.
power, of fear, of distrust,
Mm-hmm.
we got a big problem. And so
Man.
we have to work on that. Yeah.
Man, I appreciate you bringing that to light and the many books that you're doing to help, empower, educate, and enlighten our people. I'm curious to know what is your personal mission in life? How and how you're currently carrying it out? Because I feel like you've built something really amazing here, and I'm curious to know how that has carried out for you and continue to carry out for you in your life. So, what is your personal mission in life, and how are you currently carrying it out?
My personal mission is to help people, the greatest number of people. I had said it at one point, I said 1 million people, but I think we passed that. Okay. When I look at the book,
I think
around
so
the
too.
world, but to empower 1 million people to understand who they really are, to understand the powers that they possess, and to learn, practice, and master the skills necessary to utilize those powers
Mm,
for good.
yeah.
And we've been doing that by teaching seminars. I speak at different churches, different organizations every Saturday morning for the last 6 years at least.
Mm-hmm.
I do a success mentorship class.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about a half-hour class every Saturday morning on Instagram and on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And we also on Zoom. So we have people there who attend the Zoom. We have discussions about it. But each week we share a topic. A couple of weeks ago, we did a whole piece on how to do a life plan. Right now, we're at the beginning of the year. Everybody says, plan your life.
Mm-hmm.
What's that? It says, plan your work and work your plan. Okay, but how do you actually do it? How do you
Right.
actually write a life plan? And so we took in the 12 Universal Laws of Success, Chapter 7, talks about planning, the law of action. How do you
Mhm.
lay out your plan? How do you write your goals? How do you understand your goals? How do you break your goals down into doable chunks so that
Mhm.
you can develop a day by day action plan to get your life done? So that's our mission, because once you teach people these skills, they're never going back.
Yeah.
You know, it's like once you learn how to drive, you're never going to want to walk again.
No. It's just too convenient now.
Okay. And so that's our mission, man, to teach more people how to fly, how
Man,
to be what they want to be, do what they want to do, and have anything they desire.
I love that. Now, while Dr. Harris is out here teaching people how to fly and inspiring and motivating us, who motivates you? Like who are like three people you look up to and why?
Well, I'll tell you, George Frazier has always been a good friend. George and I go back, oh man, 30 over 30 years. We've known one another, probably close to 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a person, I like to judge people by their long-term impact.
Mm.
Okay. A lot of people are like flash in the pants, and I mean, like, God bless them. I love them, you know. But those people who have stood the test of time. So George Frazier,
Mm-hmm.
Reverend Ike. I worked for Reverend Ike,
Mm-hmm.
and for the young people, you may not know who Reverend Ike is, but Reverend Ike was the first televangelist. Reverend Ike was on TV before all these other guys got on TV. Okay,
Really? Okay.
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Reverend
That's
Ike. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, Reverend Ike. We had a mega church before we didn't even know what the name was. Our church held 4,500 people, and he'd
Wow.
pack them in. He'd pack them in.
Right.
When Reverend Ike made his transition, some of the people there were like Bob Proctor, okay,
Mm.
Al Sharpton,
Yeah.
yeah, Michael, what's his name? Michael Beckwith.
Yeah. So this is the legend that these legends came from.
That's right.
or,
That's right. Right. Reverend Ike was a millionaire. Reverend Ike had a ticker tape, you know, before the computer. When you
right.
kept up at the stock market, they had the ticker tape. He had a
Right.
ticker tape in his living room. Okay. Yeah. Reverend Ike owned, at one point, he owned 17 Rolls Royces.
Wow.
And he had one, there's only 14 Rolls Royce limousines, like the Queen of England has one, and he had one.
Reverend Ike was ahead of his time.
Oh man, he was. He was. And you know, to see the lineage, that's why I say impact.
Right.
Reverend Ike and Al Sharpton studied under the same bishop in Brooklyn, New York, Bishop Washington. Okay?
Uh-huh.
And so Al was there at his memorial service.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two key people that really, you know, I look up to, admire. And then a man named Benjamin Sneed.
Benjamin Sneed. That
Benjamin
name sounds
Sneed.
familiar, but I'm not sure who that is.
Well, he was a lawyer. He was my uncle,
Okay.
but he was Della Reese's lawyer. She wrote about him in his book.
Uh,
He was Wilt Chamberlain's lawyer, the great basketball player.
okay. All right.
All right. He came along in that era of Chamberlain, Sugar Ray Robinson, Jackie Robinson. He was good friends with Jackie Robinson, but he was a man who taught me not to fear.
Well,
Okay. Now, let me rephrase that. He taught me not to be overcome by fear.
okay.
To not fear, it might be silly.
Well,
Okay. You know, I think a part of teaching our children is what to fear. Don't touch the stove, you know, back away from this. But he
right.
taught me how to function in spite of fear.
Mhm.
You know, he was a lawyer and he had some of those big cases, you know, those kind of cases where when you go to court, somebody's following you home.
Mm.
And you're the lawyer. Okay.
They're like, all right, I get to the
Yeah,
lawyer, I can influence this case.
yeah. You see. So if I said those three people, George, Reverend Ike, and Benjamin Sneed.
But, like, I'm just thinking about how grateful I am for people like yourself, family members, and so forth. Because I stand on. I'm here because of my ancestors, and you know, you are exactly what our ancestors prayed for. We are what our ancestors prayed for, and we're going on to do these amazing things. Who in your family has really contributed to the person that you are today?
Well, I'll tell you, my mother was a strong contributor, but I had an Aunt Lavinia.
Mm-hmm.
I came along in that era when black women teachers
Mm-hmm.
were paid 40% less than what white women teachers were paid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they thought
Wow.
it was okay. Okay.
Right.
That was state law. No problem. Okay.
Right.
And so my mother married, my dad, my aunt never married, but in those days, the school teachers used to live together
Mm-hmm.
because many of them never married. And so after my mother passed, my Aunt Lavinia was always there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back to Wilmington when she was very, very ill. I came back to Wilmington to take care of her. And she perked up and lived another 17 years.
Mm.
So that was the rock in my family. She was that person that taught us to value education.
Mm-hmm.
That she was a school teacher, and so she was teaching me from the time I could walk. And they gave me a book, man, and a pen and a pad of paper before they gave me a toy. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And so that family member was powerful. And my uncle Benjamin Sneed. So these are two people. They were brothers and sisters, but these were two people who, one, valued education, two, valued excellence.
Mm-hmm.
They say, whatever you do, do it to the best of your ability. It doesn't matter whether you're a PhD or whether you're a painter,
Yeah.
a house painter. But whatever you do, do it to the absolute best of your ability and do it with excellence.
Yeah.
So
I
those
love
two
that.
were my rocks on which I built my life.
Yeah, I love that. And I try to tell that to students as well. Um, uh, Now, sometimes in the path to excellence, sometimes you stumble along the way, and I'm a believer that that's part of the process. Sometimes it helps you become better. Um, uh, do you subscribe to that? And then if so, like when you think about failure, what's the importance of giving people room to fail?
Well, there are two things in life: you either win or you learn.
Mm-hmm.
So failure is just a dress rehearsal for success.
Mm.
You
Okay.
literally fail your way to success. Anybody who has not failed probably hasn't done anything significant.
Uh-huh.
So failure is the learning process by which you get better.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't try, you don't fail. But
Mm-hmm.
each time you fail, you learn from it. Look at what looks like a failure is a learning lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Say, okay, well, this doesn't work. Thomas Edison, when a news reporter interviewed him and said, Mr. Edison, you have failed over 3,000 times to find this so-called filament to make a light bulb.
Mm-hmm.
Edison said, I haven't failed at anything. I have successfully identified 3,000 ways that do not work.
Mm. I love that one. I've heard it
Okay.
before, but no matter how many times I hear it, still gets me. And you
Yeah.
said it so perfectly.
Yeah. You see, and so failure is proof of effort. You
Right.
see, we have to keep going and growing. The moment we think we know everything, we start to decline.
Mm.
As you climb a mountain, the first thing, if you climb that mountain with proper consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing you realize is that there's another mountain.
Mm.
And so life is always a process of going and growing. As long as you keep growing, you can keep going. As long as you keep going, you keep growing.
Mm-hmm.
expand your education, expand your exposure. There's an African proverb that says that the man who has never left home thinks his mother is the best cook.
I understand that, but I'm gonna still say my mom's a good cook because I don't want her come calling me up.
Right. But see, your mom said that your mom makes what she makes. But then when you go and get some Italian food, some Indian food, some Chinese food, you may go become a vegetarian. See, so our level of exposure, the more we can see, the more we can be. One of the things with our young people, a question often comes up is, how do you make right decisions?
Okay. Mm-hmm. How do you make right decisions?
How do you make the right decisions? And the first answer was by experience. Okay. So they say, well, how do you get experience? And the answer is by wrong decisions. Mm-hmm. And so you make your mistakes, you learn from the mistakes, and then you get better. Mm-hmm. Every day and every way, I'm getting better and better. I like to teach and share affirmations. I've done a lot of work with young people. I've taught in the Upward Bound program. Yeah. Some other programs working with, middle schoolers and high school students. And one of the things we tell them, every day and every way, we work a lot with affirmations. So one of the affirmations is, every day and every way, I'm getting better and better. Mm-hmm. And you keep programming yourself. So tomorrow you work a little harder, you try a little harder. You do your best to be your best.
Man, I like that. What's a skill you think everyone should have, and why?
I think the most powerful skill is the skill of learning.
Okay.
Yeah. In the 12 Universal Laws of Success, the opening chapter starts with what we call how to study. Mm-hmm. You see, because once you understand how to study, then whether you're reading a book, an article, a post, then you understand how to get the essence of it. So the most powerful skill that you can have is the skill to learn, how to study, how to learn, how to practice, and how to master. Mm. And everything in life is a skill. Our company is called the Life Skill Institute. Mm-hmm. And what the essence is that anything you need to know can be learned. Yeah. And so perfect the skill of learning. How do you learn? How do you study? Number one, survey. Whenever you're looking at a book or an article, survey it so you can see the whole thing. Flip through the book. Look at the table of contents. Look at how the book is organized before you read a word. That starts to program your mind for understanding. Mm-hmm. Q, set questions. If you're reading a post, what questions do you expect this post to answer? If you're reading a book, what do you expect this book to provide? And then R1 is to read it. Okay, read it. R2 is to review it. A lot of times we just read it and think, like when people are studying for the final, they learn just enough to remember it one day.
And don't come back to it ever again.
No, don't come back to it ever again. Okay. Yeah. But see, when you read it and recite it and you review it, that like a second time through. And then R3 is to recite it. And when you recite it, that's when you know you got it.
Nice.
Once you can recite something, then you may have to recall it, but it's there forever. It's like riding a bicycle. So survey, question, read, review, recite. So that's the most powerful skill, because once you perfect that skill, there's nothing you cannot learn.
I love that. What are you most nervous about in the future, and how can you prepare for it?
I think the thing that I'm most nervous about is the perpetuation of ignorance and darkness.
Mm.
You know, life is like a garden.
Yeah.
People plant flowers. You never have to plant weeds.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a part of the universe. The universe is a harmonic universe. There's positive and there's negative. If there's an up, there's a down. If there's light, there's darkness. And so the moment you have flowers, weeds appear.
Mm-hmm.
If you just have fertile earth, weeds will grow, whether you plant them or not. Where they come from, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But when we live in a society that's perpetuating darkness,
Mm-hmm.
that's perpetuating ignorance, and that's perpetuating lies, whatever you perpetuate grows to become your reality. I mean, you look at a country like, you know, in World War II, like Hitler's Germany.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those people believed whatever they were saying was the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It may have been a lie, but they believe it. We look at America today. There are people who perpetrate lies as though they're truth. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's my biggest fear, because once you deceive people and then people don't understand what is true anymore. Like the whole idea, when I was a child, the newspaper was relied on for truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the newspaper was manipulated, you know, because the powers that be controlled the newspaper. So when you had, for example, the 1921, when you had the Tulsa massacre, they didn't put anything about it in the newspaper.
Yeah. They
Okay.
not.
Yeah, it was like it had never happened. Okay.
Right.
And so this idea of when you can't trust the news anymore. You see that lawsuit where it's coming out that, was it Fox News, that
Mm-hmm.
they knew certain things weren't true about this whole election thing. The people who were denying the election, they knew it wasn't true, but yet they perpetrated it.
Yeah.
So that's the fear. Whenever people project lies and darkness,
Mm-hmm.
so that ordinary good people are confused and don't understand what's really going on, that's my fear.
Yeah.
That's
And
what I worry about.
and I think that what makes, you know, the great rules that you gave us earlier in reference to reading, reciting, and really breaking down, you know, the information that you're reading and what you're reading, and be able to, you know, dissect it in a way. It's like, okay, does this make sense? Let me get the third source here, because like
Yeah,
there's something a little funny about this piece right here that just doesn't add up to
yes,
me as
yeah,
I
yeah,
recite
yes, yeah.
it.
Mhm. And it's important, you know, to our young people to teach them to analyze, to
Mhm.
question. You know, just because you saw it online ain't true. You know, it
Right,
may or may not be true. Just because somebody posted it, you know, you need to, like you said, let's go to another source. Let's check this. Let's check that,
right,
because you have to be able to see the truth.
right.
And when young people are miseducated, they are not able to see the truth. And that's intentional. There's nothing that the power structure loves other than ignorant people.
Mm.
They love people who don't understand what's going on, because think about this. When in Germany, first thing you do when a dictator takes over is what? Burn the books. In China, first thing you do when a dictator takes over, burn the books.
Right,
Why? Because you want people to have only one source of knowledge, one source of truth, and that's what you tell them.
right.
It may be the biggest lie on the planet, but if you tell them that's the truth and there's nothing else that they can rely on, they believe it and they'll act on it and they'll die for it.
Mm. Yeah, so true. Now, I want to take a little bit of a transition here, because I want to go down briefly, you know, through the success that you've had throughout your career, because um a lot, I know there's going to be some young person or somebody who's going to be inspired by hearing you talk today, your story. They're going to pick up these books. Um and I remember talking to young people, especially young people who graduate college, and they think that because they read your book and they got their degree. Now they could just make everything happen in and get this amazing job and be public speaking and teaching and all this other stuff. And I tell them it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes every person that you look up to and admire to, they have started. They had a humble beginning somewhere. They started somewhere, and it's usually not at the height of the career that you think they started at, right? And so to that, I asked this question: what was your first job?
My first job was a key punch operator
No,
in college.
I would have never guessed that one.
Yeah, that was my first job as a key punch operator. I was in college, and in those days, when I went to college, I was only 16.
Okay.
And so think about this: a 16-year-old black man leaving the segregated schools of the South, going to a predominantly white Ivy League school where you had 725 kids, of which only 5 were black. Okay. Coming up against some of the best high schools in the country.
Yeah.
And here I come from North Carolina. Okay. And I realized, number one, that a scholarship didn't cover you. You needed to have money to do other stuff. And so my first job was a key punch operator. And that's like a typist. In those days, computers didn't have this. You had actually punch cards. I attended the March on Washington in 1963 in person. Okay. So that's how far I go back. Okay?
Oh man, you go way back.
Yeah.
I only go back to the Million Man March in Washington, which was like in the 90s. I remember going to
95, I think. 95? Yeah, I went to that one too. Yeah, okay, I wanted to compare. Yeah, I wanted to compare them, and the March on Washington was really bigger. You know, they never want to tell the truth about that. But I heard Dr. King speak. I heard the I Have a Dream speech, and I saw that there was a sea of people from one monument to the other. There was it was just complete people, and so. I know at the March on Washington, at the Million Man March, it covered about 3/4 of that, you know. Yeah. So, just seeing that, made you, it really made you proud that we could come together and not have issues. But you had asked me a question. I went off on a whole tangent.
Oh no, you answered it because I asked you what your first job was, and then you tell me about the typist. Now, when you take a look at your illustrious career, I know you've been a teacher, a writer. You're still a teacher and a writer, and I know you had the music business career before that. A lot of people probably look at this episode and just think of you in the form of a teacher in every sense of the word and form, whether it's through your writing or through your speaking. What would you say were like the steps that were important for you? What were the most important steps that got you to where you're at today?
Well, I think one of the key steps is to realize that, life is not necessarily predictable. And so you have to be able to roll with the punches. That one of the most important things that you can have is a positive attitude.
Yeah.
And so when I would go through, I had failures and disappointments in the music industry and in every industry and law, because everything doesn't work out a certain kind of way. But the one thing that I say will keep you going is they always say, keep your eye on the prize. You got to really figure out what you want in life. And for our young people, my son asked me one day, he says, Dad, how do you figure out what you want? And so I said to him, well, what do you love doing? Because if you want something that's not what you love doing, you're probably not going to stick with it. So identify what you really love doing. Now some young people say, well, I love chilling. Okay, well, what's the next thing you love? Because chilling may not pay the bills.
Yeah.
Okay. But excuse me. But find something you love doing
Uh-huh.
and then stick with it.
Right.
The thing that always keeps you going is to keep your eye on the prize. That
Right.
once you know what you want to do, you think back on Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry knew he wanted to make movies.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to be a producer. And in those early days, man, he was sleeping in his car.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were going and doing shows at the churches and nobody showed up. It wasn't enough money coming in, but he kept his eye on the vision. So for our young people, figure out what it is you want to do, what you want to be. When people ask you, I'll tell you what really scares me, Terrell. When people ask a young person, well, what do you want to be? And they
Mm-hmm.
say, I don't know. What do you
Mm-hmm.
want to do with your life? I don't know. That's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And so for young people and for older people, I'm the Renaissance man, like I'm still going through growth and evolution. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
learning. But to that idea of figure out what you want,
Mm-hmm.
okay, write it down, write it down in great detail where you can say it in one or two sentences. Tyler Perry said, I want to produce films and movies and TV shows. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I want to be, you know.
Yeah.
And I
Uh,
say, I want to transform people. I want to change their lives. I want to teach people how to fly, millions and millions of them.
yeah. I love that. You when you were talking, you made me think about back when I was a knucklehead youngster, how my grandma used to say to me, like, if you don't stand for nothing, if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
those questions of not knowing what I want to be or what I want to do, stem from those conversations of like, well, you like go figure out, because if you don't, you're gonna fall for anything. You're gonna be in the
yeah,
streets with the rest of these knuckleheads. So
yeah,
go out and explore and do some things and expand your learning so that you can figure out what it is you want to do. um Led me to a life now where I when I go to speak, one of the things I often tell young people, I was like, hey, do what you love and love what you do. And I said, let me say it for
yes,
you again. Do what you love and love what you do. Because that is the key. Once you do something with a passion that you love and you have this obsession to keep getting better at it and bringing that vision to the world, there's going to come a time when somebody is going to recognize that gift and that thing that you do, whether you're a painter, a sweeper of the sidewalk, whatever it is, and they're going to pay you the biggest bucks to do that because you do it in a way that nobody else can do it
yes,
because of
yes.
because your love and passion for it.
But that's what Dr. King said. If you're going to be a street sweeper, you be the best street sweeper in the world. People come along and say, man, Terrell swept this street, brother. You can eat off this thing. You can drop your ice cream and pick it up. You don't have to worry about nothing. Wow. You
But
said something, though, that really, stimulated something in my thinking, and is that, our young people to really really look towards what you want to be doing, have to really put some time into that if you ever go down to the river, if you have a boat in a river and you get in the boat and you have an engine, and a rudder and whatnot,
mm,
that if you go out into the river and you don't have a destination,
mhm,
then the river will take you where it wants you to go.
mm,
And so life is like a river.
mhm.
Time, we live on the river of time. And so
Yeah.
when we don't have a destination, when we don't have goals, when we
Mhm.
don't have a purpose to our lives, then the river will take us. And that's how, the river that is the system knows that they can build prisons based on the number of kids in the third grade.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So the river. So if you got a certain number of kids in the third grade who don't know what they want to do, don't know what they want to be, don't know then you can count on 20 years they'll be in prison. So we'll have the doors of the prison waiting for them.
Mm, man, that's deep but true. Um, when you think about life, what's one good lesson life has taught you?
Keep plugging.
Keep plugging.
Keep plugging. Keep plugging. That no matter what happens, it's not how many times you stumble down, but it's the number of times you pick yourself up off the ground and keep moving on to meet your goals.
Right.
There'll always be disappointments. And I mean, there's sometimes, I tell you, Terrell, there's sometimes in my life right now, there are challenges that I face. They may be bigger than, but whatever is blocking you from your good.
Yeah.
And your purpose is a challenge. Mm-hmm. And so don't worry about the stumbles. Don't worry about the fumbles. Just keep rolling. I was watching that game with Patrick Mahomes. The one thing that I think a message I'd like to leave our listeners with, when you do your part, God can do his part.
Ooh.
And you do all you can do. Be flat out. So in that game before the Super Bowl, you remember that they were Mahomes was hurt. Okay, he's limping. Okay, they're down there. They need a field goal to win the game, but they're too far out, and they're figuring he's going to throw because he's limping. He can't, and he runs. Remember that? He runs. And so he did all he could. He's like, I don't care if this ankle breaks. I'm running on this sucker. But he didn't know that the universe had a good message for him when the guy tackled him. Remember they got the penalty?
Yeah.
That 15-yard penalty that put him in the spot for the field goal.
Right.
And they won the game. Yeah. Sure but if he had not run, then the penalty would never be.
Yeah.
And so the obstacles that you face, think about this. If there was no Goliath, we would never have heard of David.
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
That's factual right there.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so to our young people, when you come up against a wall, you just figure out a way to go over it, under it, around it. Sometimes you just have to go through that sucker. Like, if you, one of the guys says, if you don't find a door, make a door.
There you go. Okay. Make that door.
That's it.
They don't invite you to the table, build your own.
That's it. That's it, man. Quit trying to get in places where people don't want you. Build your own.
Right. Go to places where you celebrate it, not just tolerate it.
Someone asked, it said 3 things. That number 1, it said that always have fun.
Yeah.
And I'm not being frivolous, but always see life as a good thing. Okay. Yeah. That whenever bad things happen to you, instead of saying, oh, woe is me, say, what good lesson should I get from this situation? Maybe it's a person you really should have run from in the first place. Now they've shown you who they really are. Now you're clear. Run. Yeah. Now the lesson is don't get in this situation again. Okay. Okay. And then the second point is this: to hang out with people who are excited about seeing you. Mm-hmm. You know how when you come home and your kids think, Daddy, Daddy, oh, and they just run up and hug you. Yeah. You want people like that around you all the time, man. People that when you walk in, they're excited on your job, and you walk in the door, everybody in the room, hey, Herb's here. Come on in, Herb. We can get to work now.
I love that. Because I mean, that really does change things. That ignites. It does. And then it gives you the, talk about earlier when we were talking about energy, like you can't keep serving on an empty cup. So at some point you need to refuel your energy, right? You need to
yes.
so that you can continue to serve and pour into others.
Yes. Yeah. And the third point is that there's always another mountain. That you always stay in the growing mode. No matter how old you are, to be in the learning mode and the growing mode. When I'm 100, you call me back when I'm 100. Now we're saying, Terrell, man, I just learned something new. I just went somewhere different. I just got into this. I just got into that. There's always another mountain, and it's that process of continuous growth that will take you to who you are and who you were created to be.
I love that. I'm glad that you mentioned that because I do have listeners who are in that middle phase of life, right, where they stayed at a job that for too long that they were tolerated and not celebrated. They weren't allowed the opportunity to grow and show and become their full potential. And they're at the state of life where they're like, all right, I need something different. And they're going through the interviews and like, and they probably hear you talking like, you know what, I got something to offer. I want to do what Dr. Harris is doing. What advice would you give to that person who's want to make that transition of, where they're at now in life and come into this industry to be an educator, writer, speaker, based on the knowledge that they have, that they were never allowed the platform or opportunity to do so?
Okay, that's a great question. That's great. And number one, cost it out. In other words, in a business, whenever a business is getting ready to do a new endeavor, when Time Magazine was, I think they were coming out with People Magazine, they budgeted it out and gave it enough time to be able to become profitable. So once you decide that you're unhappy, that there are two kinds of journeys. There's a journey from where you say, look, I'm sick of this. I don't know where I'm going, and I know I'm getting out of here. Okay. And that's okay, because as long as you stay in there, you're going to be framed by that situation. So many times you have to get out so you can now see where you really want to go. So get on out. But once you get out, take the time now to get clear on where you want to go. See, sometimes people get out and all they want to do is get out. And then what they'll do is they'll find out next thing you know, they're back in another trap. It's like, like people who get out of relationships and don't learn. They meet a bad person who's mean to them, disrespects them. They save their money. They get out, but then they have no plan. They have no other goals. And next thing you know, another mean person comes along and scoops them up. So if it's a journey from, get out of there, but then stop and take the time to figure out where you really want to be, who you want to be with, okay, what you want to be doing. Okay.
Nice.
If it's a journey to, then once again, always cost it out. Most people fall down on their dreams because they expect results too soon. So they'll quit a job to go into a business undercapitalized, And so to always look at life as a business, especially in the transition phases.
Yeah.
When you say, okay, I hate this job, I need to get it. So what do I need to do? All right. What job do I want? Okay. Do I want to be an entrepreneur? Okay. All right. Well, what business do I want to be in? Okay. And do I understand that business enough? I've seen people open restaurants who really don't know anything about running a restaurant. It sounds like a good idea. So learn all you can about where you want to be, so that you understand all the dynamics. But always be very concerned about the finances, because once you jump off out of that uncertainty, see, the thing about a job is it's going to pay you. Now, you're going to have more month at the end of the money, but you still okay, but you still keep going. See, you just have to figure out how to get through those last 5 days of the month.
So
you do.
So
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. See, so look at. You say, all right, I want to get out of here, but now let me see where I want to go, and let me create a stash. Right. In the 12 universal laws of success, we talk about the law of value.
Yeah.
And where you talk about putting your money, getting your money right, to take control of your money, to live with a budget. So if you're going to go off on this deal, you say, I need to have enough money stashed to be able to take care of me and my family for 6 months, for a year, while I'm building my business. Because many times when you start a business, especially as an entrepreneur, the results don't come as quickly as you want them to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're a farmer and your family is really hungry, I mean, starving, the kids are like, look, skin and bones,
Mm-hmm.
and you plant corn today,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how hungry you are, you cannot eat from that corn tomorrow. That corn takes about 60 days to mature to where you can eat it.
Yep.
And so when you go from one environment to a new environment, to understand all the dynamics of that environment. So if I'm going to feed my family with corn, then we got to figure out how to live for 60 days. Okay.
Yeah.
Once that 60 days is up, we good. Now
Right.
meantime, I got to be taking care of the corn. I got to be pulling up the weeds and killing the worms and all that.
And so you can have a good harvest later on. So you got to make
Yeah.
sure you till
Yeah.
you got to do
Yeah.
some
You
tilling.
see? Yeah. Mhm.
That's how I know you got some North Carolina roots, because you started talking about the garden, the
Yeah.
corn.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
North Carolina
Yeah.
came out of you.
That's it, man. That's it. We were farm people. I had a picture of me and a mule, as a kid,
Uh-huh.
trying to figure out how to make that mule into a horse. Like, the
Right.
ugliest horse I ever seen. My dad said, that's a mule.
Oh man.
Yeah, man.
All right, so let's me and you could probably talk forever, but
Yeah.
let's end off with these last two questions, because
Mhm.
I want to make sure I capture the audience attention span to the right amount of length of time for while we do our podcast. When you look at the future of the education industry, the the book industry that you've been involved in, what does the future look like to you, especially for people that look like us, but
Mhm.
our melanated folks? What
Yeah.
does the future look like to you?
Well, number one, for education, we as a people are going to have to take it upon ourselves to educate our children. Okay.
Mm.
Now, this doesn't mean pull them out of the school system and all that. Okay. But it means to make them aware of what's right and wrong, what's true and untrue, and then to provide that platform to teach them ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
In the old days, you had a infrastructure of churches.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of the education came through churches. Kids, we learn how to speak in church. You go back, almost every gospel singer, Aretha, you go back, most of your entertainers came out of the church where they learned to perfect their craft. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at the education, this mindset that's happening right now in the country, and this happened before, back in the early 1900s. This happened once before, so we know it now. When you see that mindset happening, the political structure is embedded. It's deep. So you have to figure out a way to manipulate through that and then educate your children. You have to start figuring out ways that you can put them into the churches or your community organizations, some leaders entrusted to teach the truth. Okay. So that's going to be critical for the future, because otherwise, Malcolm X, I think, said, the master is not going to educate you on how to free yourself. That doesn't even make bad sense. Forget good sense. That doesn't even make bad sense. Anybody who has you under their thumb is not going to teach you how to get out from under their thumb. Mm-hmm. And so once you realize that, to take it upon your responsibility, to take it, they say, in my house, my children are going to learn this. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if I don't know it myself, I'm going to find somebody who does, and I'm going to take my children there with them, and we're going to learn it together. Okay. Yeah. And it may mean that I have to take some time away from somebody else, but that becomes a top priority. Education of our children should be a top priority, not the football, not the TV, not the car. I love riding old cars. My friend said, Doc, I thought you would have a Mercedes. I got a Mercedes, but it's a 91. It's a 91. It's been paid for 25 years.
It's the classic. And I know exactly what's wrong with it. When this light go, I know exactly what I need to do to fix it.
That's it. So instead of calling it an old car, I said I deal with antiques. Okay.
I love it. I love it. I think I'm about to steal that line, Doc. I'm about to steal
Okay.
that line.
All right. Go right ahead, man.
Oh man. All right, so let's end off like this. Tell us what projects are you currently working on, and where can people find you? And plug all them books. Give me the
Yes.
books. You can put them
Yes.
up there. Tell us about it, where we can go get
Yes.
them, and
All
then what you're
right.
currently working on, and where we can find you.
All right. Well, all of our books are available at herbertharris.com. This is Solving the Race Issue in America. It's by H.J. Harris. That's my first two initials. It's available online. It's available herbertharris.com, and you can find everything we have there. And then the 12 Universal Laws of Success. This is the Bible, and this is everything's on Amazon, but on our website, herbertharris.com.
Okay.
And on our website, one of the things that we're promoting this year is people need tools to be successful. Yes. If you take your car to the garage, the guy that's going to fix your car has all the tools necessary.
Right.
And so we have something, we call it the New You Success Bundle. And the purpose of that is that it gives you all the tools you need to be successful. And it's on our website, the New You Success Bundle. It gives you not only the book, the ebook, but it gives you the audio book, over 6 hours of recorded information. It gives you the workbook. It gives you our home study course where we teach you how to assess your situation, make changes, set new goals, how to make an action plan. And it has a number of audios that you can listen to help you program yourself as you're riding in your car. So that's our main project now, to share with as many people as you can, that New You Success Bundle. And the final piece, we've been doing interviews. I've done now over 65 interviews. We call them Success Talk. Okay. And what I love to do is you can go to our website, herbertharris.com, and book a call. You see a tab say book a call, and schedule a call directly with me. And we'll talk about some of the things you're doing, a success consultation, but it may be a fit that we'll set up an interview with you to be a part of this new book where we're talking about the life lessons. We're collecting life lessons that people have learned. So those are our projects right now. Everything is through herbertharris.com.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Go to herbertharris.com. I might have to go in there myself, and me and Dr. Harris might have to have some conversations so I can see if I can make the list. If I got valuable information I could give to the book.
Yes. All right, now. Do that, man. I look forward to it.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. So thank you again, Dr. Harris, for coming on and blessing our audience with just your knowledge, your wisdom, your story, and your energy. I love it. Any last words of wisdom for the people before we head out?
Now, last words of wisdom is keep going and growing. Keep reading and leading. Keep doing and doing. The Bible says, don't be just hearers of the word only, but be ye doers of the word. So what you do on a day-to-day basis will transform your life from what it is to what you want it to be. Because you can truly be what you want to be, do anything you desire, have anything you want, always knowing that the best is yet to come.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Words of wisdom from the very own Dr. Herbert Harris. This has been another episode of Rise Every Nation. I'm your host, Terrell Simmons, signing out and say make it a great day.